Right now, as was indicated, that we are in an environment of incredible change, and things are changing literally within 24 hours. It's amazing to me. I go into a meeting, whether it be Parliament or Cabinet, and come out at the end of the evening, go home and turn on the TV and just listen to the news and how many things have changed just within 8 hours. And so I was asked a couple of weeks ago what it was to be like to be a leader today in the environment, and Mario will be able to relate to this. I said it's very similar to being able to flying in a cloud, where you can't see anything, you don't know if you're upside down, if you don't know if you're going straight. And the only way that you could make it through that cloud is through instruments. If you are not a person that is accustomed to dealing with instruments, then you're going to be in a lot of trouble. And so one of the instruments that we have is intuition and some basic numbers. And one thing that does not change is some basic rules that we can be guided by. And right now, the world is growing at a tremendous pace. What we're seeing that's happened in the United States of America over the last 2 years, where unemployment is at, I think it's 3.5%. Wages have increased by almost 4% in the last year. We've seen the same thing in Europe and UK, where everybody's unemployment numbers in developed countries are at all-time lows. Certainly, the expectation that the United States and China are going to resolve their trade problems, again, a lot of people are expecting the economy to grow even more than it has in the past. Janelle is very correct that probably one of the greatest things that's facing us and confronting us is this whole issue of climate change. We have been focusing on what we call preparedness, in making sure that we are ready to deal with a hurricane. I have to say to you that when I went to the Bahamas, it opened up my eyes to a completely different side of it, which is post. Imagine if, like in Bahamas, where they had to evacuate 50,000 people, had to be absorbed back into Nassau and into some of the other islands. Imagine if, God forbid, Vieux-Fort or one of our major villages, and we had 15,000 people that we had to now assimilate into other parts of our economy. The impact on your schools, housing, and even social services. So in the case of the Bahamas, Abaco is wiped out. So the businesses that were there no longer exist, and it's probably going to take the country 2 years to rebuild that place. So those 50,000 people who had jobs now don't have jobs. How do they get absorbed back into your economy? And this idea, even administratively, to identify who the people were. I mean, when we were there the third day after the storm, they were just literally putting people on boats to get them off of Abaco. But nobody had any documentation. There was no way of proving any documentation. So this idea of having an e-government, an e-platform, where basically you can set up a very quick satellite system and actually have people do their biometrics, and therefore I can confirm who the person is and actually issue documentation immediately with that person to that person, but also now I can start keeping track of where they're going, how much income they were earning before, how many kids they have, what job did they have, and therefore put a plan in place to be able to deal with them. These are all absolute necessary things to do. Now, if that's not complicated enough, there's another big element. And what has caused the problem today of climate change has globally that we have not been pricing emissions into our cost of production. So in fact, we've treated it as a free good. You know, that nobody has bothered to price it in. And so the price now that the world is putting on emissions is $75 a ton. So it means, using your example, of 2 tons, it means the cost of coming to Saint Lucia now would increase by 2 times 75, $150. That was for 2 people or for 2 people? So $75 each is what the price would be. Now, what's interesting is that when I was at the meetings with the ministers of finance at the World Bank, many of the ministers of finance of the developed countries were actually salivating at this idea of being able to put a new tax in, right? But the question that we're asking is, who should that revenue go to? Because when you emit carbon emissions, it doesn't stay in your hemisphere. It goes into the global hemisphere. And it's having an impact on all of us. So should that money not actually go into a global fund? And that the monies that we've been asking for to be able to build resilience, to invest in adaptation and mitigation, that's what should be funding it, because that is actually the cost of what is taking place. So in the case of Saint Lucia, if in fact we were to implement a carbon tax, the gas prices in this country would go up by $1.50 a gallon, and the electricity cost would go up by 4 cents US. So almost just over 10% increase. So that, I'm saying that to you not because we're going that direction, but I'm saying to you that you have an appreciation of what has not been charged in the past. And that this is a very vexing issue that we are trying to get resolved moving forward. Before I leave, I think that one of the more important topics I really want to talk about is a very important graph that spoke about the medium and median wage rates or earnings. That's the most worrisome problem. You know, to live on $1,400 a month. And that the vast majority of our Saint Lucians are caught in that dilemma. And we know that in fact that there are some people who are working in businesses who are actually earning half that amount on a monthly basis. And they're being expected to pay for their bus fares, they're being expected to raise their children, to operate a home, and to deal with their healthcare issues. It's just not possible. So when we looked into it, and we're looking into it even more critically, is that 85% of the jobs in Saint Lucia are in the service sector. So hospitality, retail, financial sector. And we know that the organizational structure of all of those businesses are relatively the same. Line staff, supervisor, middle management, and executive. So here's the question. How many people who start off as line staff during their entire career are potentially going to make it to become a supervisor? 20%? Maybe if you want to push it, 30%? And then of those people who are supervisors, how many of them are eventually going to become middle management? 5%? And of those middle management, how many of them are eventually going to become executive? 1%? So it means that the solution to the salary problem cannot be relied on people getting better jobs. So it means that conservatively, 60% of our population are more than likely going to remain for their entire career at an entry-level job. And we know that as time goes by, that the longer they stay on the job, the expectation is that their salaries go up. That's what the expectation is. So the fact is that we know that that's not good for the business, but we also know that it's a real assumption. So how do you solve that problem? Is there a way in which we can do a better job of training our line staff people? so that they're actually adding value. So a person who starts off as a waiter at a restaurant probably doesn't know a lot in the beginning, but if you start training them about different cultures, different languages, how to understand the food that they're delivering so that the value that they're giving, there's more added value that they're giving, and therefore that translates into that hotel or that restaurant being able to maintain their client, and so you as an owner can see the value that's being generated, and that person now also is going to be compensated for that additional added value, because it has to come from somewhere. So our education system becomes incredibly important, and this discussion about Tech Vox schools, and also once a person gets into the job arena, to have now additional courses on a regular basis to be able to upgrade those skill sets at all different levels. But we're correct in saying that how do I get it so that a person who is a waiter, a person who is stacking shelves at a grocery store can ever get a salary of $5,000? And I know as entrepreneurs here, it's a terrifying thought in your current business environment. And you have electricity cost at 36 cents a kilowatt hour, or is it 40 cents EC? Sorry, 90 cents EC. The cost of borrowing money at 6.5% and 7.5%. So these are all the inputs that we have, and that we now as a government are continuously looking at how we can make ourselves more competitive. And the reality is, the kind of quantum growth that we're talking about, he's 100% correct in that this is going to be export-led growth. So if it's export-led growth, it means that we have to have input costs here that are going to be competitive on a global basis. So I'm saying this to you not to scare you. I'm saying this to you that your government is constantly looking at these things. So I'm going to say another vexing issue that I have repeated myself from the time I've been Prime Minister. That the Chamber needs to create a private sector association. That the Chamber of Commerce and the Hotels Association and the Manufacturing Association cannot survive by yourselves. And how do I know that? If you turn to page 48, and if you cover Commerce Secretariat and just look at the titles of the staff members you have, where's the productivity? You've got to be involved in these discussions from the onset. And we are depending on the private sector for innovative ideas on how we're going to resolve these issues. And you can't keep volunteering your time. So there has to be a paid professional staff of senior technicians that are able to provide your opinion and your inputs, and to work with the technical staff of the government as well as the regional agencies in being able to solve these problems. And so again, publicly, I'm going to make this pronouncement that my government has indicated that we're prepared to identify a tax, that revenue will come directly to this private sector association to be able to help fund, to make sure that we have the requisite technical people involved. Okay, because it's not going to work the way we're doing it. It's also not working the way we're doing it in government in terms of our overall organizational structures. We're still dealing with a colonial past. I can go through ministry after ministry. I mean, Doc is here in terms of permanent secretaries. You know, permanent secretaries are the chief accounting officers. They're not technical officers. But what's happened is the technicians have migrated into the PS's jobs. And so the system doesn't work. And we need to have more accountability in the system. But the greatest thing that we need is innovation. We need ideas. And we need to be able to have discussions based on evidence. And we need to take the emotion out of it. You know, so there is a topic that's coming up, which is the change in the personal income taxes. Why do we need to change personal income taxes? Because it's inefficient. And it's not a progressive tax. Can't be that the more money you earn, the net effective tax rate that you're going to pay is less. And if we have goals and ambitions of having personal income tax being done online, then therefore there has to be a simplification as to how we calculate that tax. This is not about wanting to charge one sector more than the other, but it's about creating these levels of efficiencies. So when we sit down and we look at what the facts are, that we can collectively agree on how we're going to move forward, then everything that we do is put in the light of politics. And therefore, we spend a tremendous amount of time fighting each other rather than working with each other through these solutions. So the things that have been mentioned to you today about what's taking place in the world, I don't look with them at fear, I look at them as opportunities. Because what I'm seeing is a lot of countries are not sure where they want to go. And if we can develop a very clear plan on what we're going to focus on and what we're going to become the best at, I think that we can succeed. And it's in this time of where everybody else is second-guessing themselves, if we can be very focused. We have had a plan and a strategy with regards to the Europeans on the blacklisting. And you know, it's amazing to me that in Barbados, where they have reduced their tax structures to provide a solution, which is not proven to be what is going to be the long-term solution to their problem. And here we've decided to create a territorial tax structure. It's whether our economy, our business people buy into that, and that we become the greatest advocates of what policy that we're involved in, and the confidence that we're going to be able to move forward in. But if we're going to continuously argue as to whether tourism is the lead sector or this other sector, let the numbers speak. And we sit down collectively and make those decisions on moving forward. But to do that, we need to know that there is a professional staff that represents the private sector, that can be engaging and spend the necessary hours, that they can come back to you and hopefully get everybody's buy-in to the situation. So with that, I just want to say to you how grateful I am for the support of the Chamber and the business community. You're a very important component to our economy. There's a lot of work that we have to do. I'd like to think that we're hopefully creating a better environment for you in moving forward. The new airport is coming, the new roads are coming, the water has been expanded. We've been continuing looking to lower tax rates and the effectiveness of our tax regime. And we're recognizing that you have to compete on a global basis. And so we're hoping that you're starting to see those things reflected in our policy. So again, thank you very much and congratulations on another year.